Good evening. Welcome to the Black Doctoral Network weekly web series, Conversation Starters. I'm your moderator, Fese Ilonge, and I am thrilled that you could join us for another wonderful episode of Conversation Starters. Tonight, we will be discussing the topic entitled Mobilizing Organizational Culture in the Change Process. Joining me for this conversation are two expert scholars that will share their insight surrounding this topic. The first panelist joining us this evening is Dr. Cornelia Meeks, who's a national learning and performance consultant for over 30 clinical offices in a cabinet level federal agency. Dr. Meeks' research interests include diversity, leadership, and gender disparities. I welcome you, Dr. Meeks. I think you may be muted.
Good evening, Fese. How are you?
I'm good.
Good evening, Black Doctoral Network. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Our second panelist joining us this evening is Dr. Will Brown Jr., who is the principal owner at Brown Companies and Associates Incorporated, a professional practice providing insurance brokerage, real estate brokerage, and leadership consultant services. Dr. Brown provides leadership expertise across areas of corporate marketing operations, major public sector project management, real estate and property management, nonprofit organization, event planning, and fund development management. I welcome you, Dr. Brown.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate being here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I want to go ahead and jump right in because I know that our audience members are thrilled for this great conversation. But before we do that, just as a reminder to everyone tuning in, as our guests share their intellectual property, please give them proper credit for their contributions. So, the first question that I have for tonight's conversation is: how would you describe the relationship between organizational culture and the change process? Dr. Brown.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. Uh, let me begin by saying that I don't think we can discuss or have proper dialogue regarding organizational culture and the change process without acknowledging the role and importance of organizational change theory. I think they go hand in hand. I think you have to recognize where those relationships lie between the two. I would describe the relationship between organizational culture and the change process as key connecting components with an effective organizational change initiative. And I can elaborate on that a little more because I think it might be important. Uh, Prior studies support this connection between organizational culture and performance outcome or process change, as we would refer to. But the research is still a little lacking when it comes to establishing a causality between the directions of which these two components go, whether organizational culture produces performance, or whether performance produces the organizational culture. So we're still a little lacking in understanding which comes first and which has the greater impact. But that is to say that these organizational change initiatives uh, tend to all fall under an umbrella of organizational change management, and so all of these things sort of get thrown into that group. So to better understand the relationship between organizational culture and process change, I think it might be a good idea to look at some of the definitions of what we're talking about when we talk about the two. To accomplish that understanding, I would provide a couple of quotes. While there are variations of definitions when it comes to organizational change, theorists, for the most part, have agreed that a simple, more simple version of organizational change is that it's a transformation, and I'm quoting here, a transformation of an organization from its current state to its desired future state. And other researchers suggest that organizational change it sets the groundwork, sets the foundation for everything else. So if we accept that notion that organizational change sets the groundwork, sets up the foundation for everything else, then organizational culture and the process of involved in organizational culture is going to fall under that. I think the idea here is that when you're looking at something as potentially complex and challenging as organizational culture, you often are going to have to look at the larger picture of the organization, the other components, its systems operation, its management operation. So everything has to be looked at and examined in order to get it right when it comes to addressing the organizational culture. Because when you think you got it right, you'll find that other components, other issues impacting the organization's performance are going to come into play and likely throw everything that you thought you had right, throw it completely out of whack. So I would say that relationship, again, between organizational culture and change process, it's connected to organizational change initiatives. That's how I would address that.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for your conceptualization. Dr. Meeks.
I agree with Dr. Brown in the sense that there's still some vagueness in terms of whether it's the culture that impacts change or change that impacts culture. I definitely know that that there are some studies that show that even when change is implemented in a positive way or successfully, that organizational culture can cause that to revert back to old habits and old things. So culture is definitely a strong factor in organizational change. And there's definitely a turbulent relationship between the two. Culture is very powerful.
Thank you, Dr. Meeks, and for both of you just providing what the literature currently states. And I like the point you mentioned, Dr. Meeks, on how organizational culture or a change process and really conceptualizing that. So the next question that I have is, how does the change process impact organizational culture? Dr. Meeks.
I think this is just like an elaboration of what we were just talking about because it definitely can cause a forceful reaction. Change can cause a forceful reaction on culture. It can cause imbalance. And we know that sometimes when we talk about organizational change, impacting culture, we think that we're just going to do away with every single thing in a culture. But in actuality, there may be some values or some beliefs or some branding in the organization that just needs tweaking in order to get the organization where the visionaries really see it that it needs to be. And sometimes the things that need changing are the things that people hold on to the most. So it can really cause a tumultuous relationship. And one of the things when you're dealing with complex organizations, particularly like M-form organizations like where I work, is so many different competing priorities. And when stakeholders are rolling out change, by the time it reaches the field or by the time it reaches and starts to replicate throughout different departments and different functions, it's so much chaos and so much metamorphosis that happens that it really creates it can be a contentious relationship. And that's where you really have organizational leadership really comes in to really control that process and really guide it. But I see it as a tumultuous relation. I see it as strenuous and turbulent. It's just my view. Maybe it's because I work for government. They're always in issues. So that's my view on that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Meeks, for your perspective. Dr. Brown.
And I agree with Dr. Meek's assessment of the impact of organizational culture in this change process. It made me think about one of the quotes, or one of the explanations that I've heard about organizational culture, and it suggests that the definition or description suggests that that's the way things are done around here. So that's the culture. Yeah, that's the organizational culture. So the change process impact on that. If you go with the notion that that's the way things are done around here, you automatically have to disassemble and undo certain attitudes and behaviors, uh, beliefs and assumptions and values and so forth. You gotta wrestle with all of that in terms of in terms of responding to the impact that organizational culture is going to have as a result of this change initiative, change process. Because, and we'll get to probably discuss some of this later, but no one initially welcomes change. We all tend to initially have some reservation about change. And when you throw in something as complex as cultural issues into the mix, where you now have professional standards at risk, you've got beliefs at risk, you've got religion at risk, and you've got attitudes at risk, you got customs at risk, you've got family values and family views and community expectations, all of that. You've got all of that you have to now contend with. And all of that gets put into this filter. And at the other end of that, you want to come out with an effective organizational culture. But there is no guarantee that all of that is going to work. There's no guarantee that the change process, the strategies that you're using, are going to produce what your desired outcomes are. And much of that might have to do with the question of whether or not you have the right strategy, whether you've selected the right strategy. And therein lies another problem, because now those individuals who produce that strategy, now you got to tell them that that strategy is not effective. And now you got another change process of which you have to deal with, convincing them that, you got to change this strategy. So it can be a very complicated and challenging process of understanding and applying the change process in such a way that it produced the desired organizational culture outcome that you're looking for.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And as you both have highlighted, it's not as simple as it may seem. It's a lot of pieces and a lot of aspects that go into that. So
Yes.
thank you for highlighting that. So the next question that I have, if we're looking more so on the external pieces that influence organizational culture, how has the current socio-political climate influenced organizational culture? Dr. Brown.
There is no doubt that current social and political environment is and has impacted organizational culture, and will likely continue to do so in the foreseeable future. Um, we've got protests, we've got proposed legislative changes in laws. We've got organizations seeking to understand how to respond to social justice cries, and they're having difficulties getting their arms around that. Uh, so it's quite challenging for some. As the leadership is attempting to understand how to do this and how to do it in such a way that it does not further complicate what they already have. And so there are certain reservations about should we do it this way, should we do it that way, should we move in this direction, should we move in that direction, and all too often, unfortunately, they're getting their advice and their instructions from the wrong people in terms of which directions they should go. I don't quite understand that, because if you have an issue that's predominantly impacting a particular group, for example. But then you go outside of that group to seek opinions about that group, as opposed to seeking your thoughts and opinions and so forth, being informed by the group that's the target of the change. So I never understood that, that sort of thing. And so I think that sort of complicates this social political environment as well. And the there is, however, what I see as an emerging paradigm shift, a fundamental change in the process that we use to approach organizational culture. For example, organizations, professional institutions, authorities are now, in many states, are now making it mandatory, for example, that certain training be in place to promote positive ethical standards, for example, to promote ethical professionalism, for example. And here recently, I became aware that certain states are now, for people who are licensed professionals in that state, they are making it mandatory that those individuals take so many hours of ethical training, so many hours, and this is a new one, so many hours of diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So now states are starting to mandate that. So I think the current social political climate is influencing the organizational culture by a number of directions, including that paradigm shift that I just referred to.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Dr. Meeks, what are your thoughts?
I would say that the current socio political climate has definitely been a breath of fresh air for organizational culture. I think it's given a new meaning to work-life balance. And let me explain, because we generally think of work-life balance as sort of like people managing their personal time, vacation time, you know what I mean, childcare and all those things. But it's really an interaction of your work and personal life. And particularly in minority communities, we've always had to tuck our personal life, you know, tuck it in our pocketbook and just walk in with our pain, walk in with our struggles, walk in with whatever conflict is happening in the community that affects us, politically, economically, whatever. And I think this climate has forced organizations to really look at how their culture is really facilitating some of the negative things that are happening in our society. I know that a lot of people have felt bombarded. Some people who are not affected by, not affected negatively in society by a lot of the larger socio-political issues, they felt bombarded at work by having to discuss these issues now and having to talk about them. But the very issues that minority communities face on the streets, once they clock out and you get in your car and you drive to your neighborhood, the issues that we face also impact policies in our workplace. It also impact people's mindset in terms of promotions, in terms of pay rates, in terms of equality in leadership. It affects so many things. And so now, because everyone has been faced with these issues, organizations have had to like bring this to the center stage now and say we need to hear what's going on with people, because whether it's for legal reasons or whatever reasons, they're having to address these things that are at the intersection of work and personal life. So I really think in some organizations it's caused confusion. In some organizations it's caused a lot of policy changes, and it's a lot heightened, a lot of emotions, because we all know that people work in organizations, they're in leadership, but they come with their own personal biases. And so these issues that have been happening around us, with organizations bringing them to the forefront, they're actually confronting negative behavior in leadership practices, and in these upper echelon positions that are causing, like bias and sort of sidelining certain people in society. So I think it's really been a breath of fresh air that this door has opened where we could actually come to work with our whole selves. I mean, you literally feel like you're putting on a smiling face to come to work. You're intelligent people, professional people, educated, people that are upstanding in different areas of and professions. But when you come to work, sometimes you feel like you have to bury a part of you. And I over the last couple of years that we've had, with the pandemic and just the other social, political issues that have happened in our communities, I've read so many articles and studies that have showed that actually suppressing your emotions, it affects your mental health at work. It affects morale. It affects so many things. It's like this has been pushing more studies for employers to realize that an organization is made up of people, and we've got to address these issues in our culture that are stifling certain populations in our organizations.
No, thank you, Dr. Meeks, for that wonderful perspective and those great examples. Just reaching out to our audience members. If you are enjoying this conversation, please share this live broadcast with your colleagues, friends, and professional networks, or leave a comment or question for our expert scholars to answer. So, we've talked a little bit about organizational culture from a social, political perspective. So now let's take a moment and look at the barriers. What are some barriers experienced by team members during the change process? Uh, Dr. Meeks.
I'm laughing because there's so many things going in my head right now. I think communication is a huge thing in the change process. And communication is a weird thing because it's just like when we were younger, we played that game telephone. It's so many things that can transpire between when a message is formulated and when it's actually delivered and then actually executed. So again, people struggle with coming in line with what the organizational values are, in contrast to what their personal values are, or what other cultures they may have adapted that are negative or not going in the direction of change that the organization wants to go. So I think communication is definitely a huge barrier. It's something that still needs a lot of work. And again, when you're a part of larger organizations where there's so many different professions that interact in that one organization, so many different geographical locations, and you have a message coming from one place, there's so much tweaking that needs to be done to actually understand the people that you're delivering the message to. And a lot of times those communication plans really cause barriers for the change process. I think there's a lot of tweaking that has to be done. I think Dr. Brown touched on that, in that when you deliver organizational change, it's not just like a one-shot deal. It's a constant transformation, constant evaluation, constant going back and talking to people, saying, how did this work? How did you like this? Well, what caused this error or whatever? So I would say for me, there's so many different things, but communication plans are, or negative communication or incomplete, is one of the biggest barriers that I see.
Thank you, Dr. Meeks. Dr. Brown.
Yes, this is an interesting one. This question, because it introduces so much of what we do and encounter on a daily basis when we're interacting with people and interacting within our organization. The I think I would probably first suggest that the sophistication of understanding the dynamics of what we're talking about here, the processes of change, that within itself can be somewhat intimidating, and folks will, tend to stay away from that which they're not comfortable with, and discussing and trying to implement and produce organizational culture that changes that sort of comfort zone that people are used to. That sort of management is tough business, as we suggested earlier. You got the view that that's the way we've always done it. As I said earlier, what's wrong with the way we're doing it now? No one is complaining. They seem to be happy with the way things are, or the complaint it wasn't really a serious complaint. It was just something minor. It's not significant, and so forth. And so this sort of resistance to change, which is based on uh, perhaps uh, some family issues, maybe culture there. It might be other professional standards that you are accustomed to. It might be friends. It might be, as we said earlier, spiritual beliefs. There could be a whole number of reasons there as to why uh, uh, cultural change could run into some obstacles. I think probably the biggest one, however, of all the obstacles, is that people just don't want to embrace fully, honestly, and truly and openly the issues that are the greatest impact on cultural divide and cultural hamstring, as I would put it. I think they just don't want to go there because it makes them uncomfortable. So how do we get them past this barrier of being uncomfortable? Some of us suggested that you just meet it head on. You just put it out there. I found in my experience, I've tried that as well, and that sometimes make people even uh, more withdrawn. The more honest you are with them, the more open you are with them, the more they become intimidated. And so they become even more withdrawn. So you try to dance with it, you try to tiptoe around it, you try to, make it so that it's politically acceptable or whatever the case may be. But you're sort of camouflaging what the true issues are when you do that. You might draw them out, but you might not get to the essence of what you need to get to because of the way you approach it. It's complicated, and I'm not sure if we found the correct formula as yet. But dialogues such as this and being able to share opinions and experiences such as this forum and sharing it with others, it might be one of the ways in which we can make further inroads into taking down some of these barriers.
Thank you, Dr. Brown and Dr. Meeks, for highlighting, as Dr. Meeks stated, communication being an issue, and as Dr. Brown highlighted, that aspect of resistance and not being really open or just plain uncomfortable with the change process. So I know we dived in a little bit earlier about the importance of the leader throughout this change process. So the question that I have is, what is the role of leadership in promoting strong organizational culture? Dr. Meeks.
Um, you know, leadership has to be aligned with the vision of the organization. Um, the leadership is sort of like the ambassador of the change process, or executing things in the field, and allowing things to be repeated and communicated so that it can metamorphosize into a new culture. So I would say that the role of leadership is to really provide structure and provide strategy. So once the change is communicated and people understand what's happening and what it's about, and you start to bring them on board, leadership has to think through the process so that it's almost like when you do micro learning and someone is helping you to learn a process. We do that so often now on YouTube. Everybody does it. You have something to do and you choose, you find the topic that you want and you find little videos that 10 videos that bring you to the finish line of what you want. And I think leadership is sort of like they create that strategy. They help to think about what the barriers are and think about what the roadblocks may be, and they think through the whole process and provide structure and strategy for people to be able to rely on. And then once people are following that, if there's an issue or whatever, and there's like a feedback process, then they can tweak that structure or tweak that strategy to be able to roll out to people, as people are looking for guidance during a change process. And so leadership really has to be firm. And that's why you have to have leaders that it's a tricky thing, because you need stakeholders that are respected and invested in the process. But you also need people who are on board with change. You need people who are going in the direction that you want your organization to go, or that you want your culture to metamorphosize to. You don't want people that are just like holding a position but holding on to old values, because it's almost like they're the force behind the change. And through all of the groundwork that they do, collecting data, and narratives about what goes on in the field, or through different levels of the organization, they're coming back. That leadership is coming back to create that structure and to create that strategy that people are going to use to roll out and actually implement the change.
Thank you, Dr. Meeks. And I just want to say, are you all enjoying this conversation? Because I am. I'm learning so much information regarding how detailed the organizational culture and change process is. Dr. Brown, what are your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. I completely endorse what Dr. Meeks has articulated. The role of leadership, or the role of leaders, is absolutely critical. They hold the key to whether the door is open or closed, or halfway open or halfway closed, or whatever the case may be. Um, Organizational change management, and thereby organizational culture in a change process, depends on leadership. That's it. It depends on leadership. Leaders or leadership influences and shape workplace culture. They have the key. Uh, Unfortunately, many organizations don't understand the real role of leaders and leadership. Uh, they hear the term, uh, they're referred to as leaders, but they don't really understand what that actually means. They don't understand the responsibilities that they have inherited or they have accepted as a leader. It is your job, it is your duty, it is your responsibility, ethically, morally, otherwise, to ensure that every aspect of that organization with respect to cultural change needs and any other organizational change needs rests with your leadership. And you're the individual that have to ensure that your organizational cultural change process achieve its goals, achieve its objective, is successful. It's your responsibility. not the people you've assigned, not the committees, not the individuals that you're holding accountable because they did not perform. Well, if they did not perform, that's your responsibility. That's you. You made that decision to assign them the task. You assisted in determining whether or not the strategy they were going to employ should be employed or something else should be done. Or you made the decision on whether or not you wanted to review the strategy in advance or whether or not you wanted them to go ahead and execute. All of these decisions rest with you as leader. So the success, the outcome of organizational culture completely depends on leader and leadership. I make no bones about that. I lay it all at the steps of leaders and leadership. It's your responsibility.
Thank you, Dr. Brown and Dr. Meeks, and just highlighting the important role that leaders have in promoting strong organizational culture. So, going back a little bit to the external variables again, how can community organizations support the change process? Dr. Brown.
Community-based organizations can support the change process, first of all, by becoming more acquainted, I believe, with the organizational change management process and thus organizational cultural change process as well as a component of that umbrella. Uh, this is the easier part for CBOs, community-based organization, is to acquire that understanding, acquire that knowledge, knowing what to do, knowing how it should be done. That's the easier part. Many organizations are able to get to that point. Where they tend to fall down is in the implementation and execution of those ideas. That's where the biggest challenge is. For many reasons, that organizations fail to completely carry out their own mission, completely carry out their own plan, completely execute their own strategies. So I think if I would offer any advice to community organizations to support the change process, look at what you've already developed as plans. And chances are you have plans. The chances are you've already discussed plans in the past. Even a greater chance that you've done nothing with those plans, that you've done nothing with those ideas. They're still sitting on a shelf. They're still somewhere in a binder. They're still in a folder. They're still on someone's desk. So my advice, my recommendation would be to dust them off. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're obsolete. And if they're outdated, you just update them, you modify accordingly. You implement, execute. That's the biggest obstacle to holding back the needed organizational change organizational cultural change process that many community-based organizations face.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Dr. Meeks.
I definitely think that community organizations need to do a better job of refreshing their knowledge bank, taking advantage of the people that are available in areas of need. You know what I mean? Like, for example, whatever areas you need expertise in the organization, always be building on that. Building, if you need financial people, always have that knowledge bank available. Always have that network available so that you can have people that that you can consult with to figure out what are happening in each area. Because like Dr. Brown said, I think execution is a big problem because a lot of times you have like this like little nucleus of people that's trying to do so much instead of reaching outward and expanding their knowledge bank. Get people who are strong in different areas so that when you come to a barrier in that area, you can reach out to people and also diversify in terms of generational representation in your knowledge bank, because we need people from all different generations. Everyone has their strong suits, you know what I mean? Just like when an organization wants a fresh new new trendy look or they're rebranding, like they go out and they canvas and they bring in to see what the millennials are saying, you know what I mean, or what Gen X is saying or whatever. um I think community organizations can do a better job of expanding their knowledge bank across generations and so forth. That way they're not exhausting themselves, they're not getting burnt out. And you can be an expert in something, but you still need collaboration with other people. And so I think an area that I really see that needs a little bit of little spunk there.
Thank you, Dr. Meeks and Dr. Brown, for highlighting the importance of these community organizations or stakeholders in the change process. So we've really dug deep into this conversation and really dissecting a lot of the aspects of organizational culture and change process. So the next question that I have is, what are some recommendations to continue the promotion of strong organizational culture during the change process? Dr. Meeks.
Let me think about that for a minute. I think branding is important. And I know branding is a popular word right now because people are doing branding for themselves. But I think of even when we roll out communication and so forth, um, I think things need to be organized. It needs to be consistent. Um, and it needs to be well thought out. So when you're rolling out that change, you think about the messages you want to send. It's almost like people who thrive through social media. They don't get up and just have and just create. I mean, some people get up and create something every day, but people have like a theme for the month. You know what I mean? They think about the message they want to put out. And so I think during that change process, you really need to have a team of people that are really thinking about how that message is being perceived and received. How is it being branded? Or is it going out in an organized fashion where people could just receive it? You know, like I'm a big fan of I read a lot, so it's not because I don't read, but I love bullet points, checkpoints. I like, something clean that I can pull out as a reference. And I know that working for an organization that's constantly changing is sickening sometimes. Really, it is, because you don't know which job aid to pick up. But the fact is, I can look at that communication, it's organized, and I can say, even if there's multiple branding, I can look to see where the changes existed and make an educated guess of what the latest is, or check in, to see what the latest is. So I really think that branding and communication is a big thing for me, because people are, again, during a change process, people are looking for direction. They're looking for direction. They're looking for structure. They're in the motion. The people in the organization are who make up the organization. So they're like in the process and in the motion of doing, and they just need guidance. So if it's clear, clean cut, and concise and available, I think that helps to really drive in the culture that you're trying to promote, and it really helps with the change process.
Thank you, Dr. Meeks, for your recommendations. Dr. Brown.
I think Dr. Meeks was on point with some of the things she articulated. Clarity, for example. I think Dr. Meeks made some reference to that component of team and organization and cultural change and so forth. Not enough of that. Not enough in terms of its importance. And when I say clarity, I mean if you're establishing directives, if you're establishing responsibilities, if you're giving assignments, if you're assigning tasks, make sure that there's clarity there. Make sure that people completely understand what it is they're expected to do and what's expected of them. Too often, we will assign a task, or too often we'll accept the task and not necessarily completely understand it. We'll say we think we understand it, And leadership and management tends to accept that as a confirmation that you understand. But I think leadership has an additional responsibility to take steps to ensure that you understand. As we do in research, we do this concept called memory checking, right? So you make sure that what's being said is what's intended to be said. You make sure that what's being communicated is interpreted in the way you intend it to be interpreted. So that's number one. I think also something else Dr. Meek was alluding to as well. That would be one of my recommendations. Uh, Effective use of skills, expertise, experiences of individuals that you have at your disposal. I've seen too many times where organizations, especially community organizations, have a wealth of knowledge and expertise and experiences and skill sets right at their fingertips, and they fail to utilize it. They fail to take advantage of the skills and expertise and experiences that's right there by people who have stepped forward and basically offered and their skills and expertise to be used for the purposes and the missions that you have in mind, and we fail to utilize them. We fail to take advantage of those skills and those expertise. And so I think that coupled with training, training in some of the areas that we alluded to earlier, training in the areas of ethics, ethical professionalism. I would I would recommend that. Training in the areas of diversity and inclusion. I would recommend that. Although that one, training in the area of diversity and inclusion, as a sort of a new phenomenon, quite frankly, is posing quite a problem in my experience for many organizations that they hear the term, they hear the concept, they understand it, but they don't quite know how to make it happen. Yeah. So I would recommend more training, more understanding, and with regard to those efforts as well.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for highlighting those key recommendations. And I just want to say thank you both for taking time out this evening to really dive deep into this topic of conversation. I know I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I know our audience members did as well. So I just want to say a huge thank you, because oftentimes when we hear organizational culture and change process, as Dr. Brown and Dr. Meeks highlighted, it can be scary to many. So thank you all for really giving great perspectives.
Thank
So
you.
that concludes this topic, but I do have one more question to ask you both before we go. How has your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network helped to enhance you personally and or professionally? Dr. Brown.
Okay. This opportunity to interact with academics, various disciplines, to change ideas and views. The value is just beyond anything I could possibly assign to it. Uh, I'm gratified that I have this opportunity to share my thoughts and my opinions and my research and my studies and my expertise in various areas. It has helped me grow and develop professionally and personally. And I think that anyone who is a pursuer, who is in pursuit of a doctorate or who holds a doctorate in any capacity, should become a member of BDN. I think it would be an experience that you will not regret. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for your continued membership. And Dr. Meeks.
Well, BDN has definitely given me a sense of belonging. It's given me a safe place to meet other people who are like me, people from different professional areas, and it's really enhanced my knowledge of how much is going on in the doctoral communities amongst minorities. So this has definitely helped me and empowered me, even in my mentoring that I do with younger generations, to really say that we have a pool and a network of people who are doing excellent things in the world.
Thank you, Dr. Meeks, for your continued membership as well. And again, I just wanted to emphasize another thank you for being scholars and experts in your areas of practice. But before we go, just want to give the audience members an opportunity to connect with you further if they have any additional questions by leaving a bit of your contact information. How can they get in contact with you, Dr. Meeks?
They can email me at cornelia@corneliameeks.com.
Thank you. And Dr. Brown.
Well, they can. I can be emailed at WLLBRWN. That's Will Brown without the vowels. JRBW@AOL.com.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Well, audience members and our wonderful panelists, tonight concludes our broadcast or season finale for spring of 2022. Again, a huge thank you to our panelists this evening for a wonderful, educational, and rich conversation. Thank you to all our viewers and audience members that have tuned in every Thursday at 7 o'clock to be part of a phenomenal discussions. We will be back in the fall with more amazing topics. Please be sure to share this live session with your friends, families, professional networks, and colleagues. Join us on Facebook or follow us on blackphdnetwork.org. I am your moderator, Fessay Longe, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good night.
Thank you.